Great to see you. I know that we just reconnected a few weeks ago. Been a long time, but thanks so much for joining my class. What a timely visit for you because you can see by the students' happy expressions they just finished the readiness assurance process, and so many of them are thrilled with that. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, three teams got them all right on one try. So
Nice,
3 out of 5. That's not bad. So, and I got to tell you, Michael's the one who introduced team-based learning to me over 20 years ago, right? When did you start at UT Austin? Oh 04
2004.
maybe? Oh
Yeah.
04. And I still get the same satisfaction out of popping into the team quizzes or whatever and listening, watching and seeing them go through all that. You're the one that introduced me to how powerful that can be. So let me just give you a little bit of background on Michael, and then I'll shut up because when we have a guest, our guest should talk more than the teacher. But Michael walked into my office back in '04, something like that, and at the time, I didn't know who we were admitting or anything like that. When they showed up, that was the first time I ever saw them. And Michael walked in, met with me, and very unlike any other PhD student, Michael walked in and said, I know what I want to do research on and do my dissertation on. It's team-based learning, and here's the deal. And I'm like, I don't know anything about team-based learning. And he convinced me to try it in my class. So you have a very unique graduate student story. And yeah, talk to us a little bit about team-based learning and how far you've come. You're still using it, right? You haven't bailed on it. Yeah,
Nope. I will add a detail or two to that origin story.
sure.
One is that you were already actually giving your students a test and then letting them talk about it afterwards. Somebody told me that, and my ears perked up. So I sought you out. Um, and oh gosh, there was going to be one other thing, but anyway, yeah, it's been a great run. Oh, the other thing was I took 10 years out. I did a master's degree, and then I was just fried. And so I was older and I had time to like figure stuff out than the rest of the folks. So I had some
None of these students
age
are in
on
that
myself.
situation. Everybody in here is 22 years old. So
Okay,
yeah,
great.
as you can tell.
Right. So Dan sent me the article that you read, peer-led team learning, which is different than TBL because I had not heard of it before he sent me this article, and I just skimmed it, and it sounds like there's like some sort of trained peer, like undergraduate leader in each group, which is a different situation. So team-based learning was born in the class of a guy named Larry Michelson in like the early 1980s at the University of Oklahoma. He was a business professor, and he was a junior business professor, which meant when the classes needed to go from 20 to 120 overnight, his was among those selected. And he had always wanted, he'd gotten a lot out of his students working on case studies and small groups and making, like, trying to make decisions about which way things should go. And he wanted to try and see if he could recreate that experience in a larger class. So, he started to cobble together team-based learning, which has got the uh, the the kind of the four pieces currently. I don't know if there's like a 12-minute video that kind of lays it all out, that I can post later or Dan can send you if you haven't seen it. But he cobbled together the sort of the readiness assurance process, individual and team, testing with immediate feedback, strategically formed permanent teams, um, these specially designed application activities, and peer evaluation. His grad students, played with it, published it, that kind of thing. And then, and he was in the management class. He's a business professor. And then in like the early 2000s, there was a federal grant given to a collection of medical schools in the Southwest that were under accreditation pressure for not having any active learning or not having enough active learning. So um, for 4 years, a bunch of faculty members got paid to kind of like play with team-based learning, um, come back together and compare their notes. Oh, try this, try that, go out and do it again, come back a year later, try this, try that, compare notes, come back a year later. And then when the grant was over, they decided they wanted to keep doing it. So they founded this team-based learning collaborative, which is now its own thing. And Dan mentioned in the chat, it has its own conference now. It's very interesting though that it was born in a class, a business class, and like puttered along there for a good long time. Um, and then this swath of medical schools adopted it, and so now as a result, it's mostly not mostly, but by far and away the majority of adoption is in medical and associated health science classes, um, and so that's why I edited a book and did this video on team-based learning in the social sciences and humanities to basically show people like, look, it works here too. Um, so yeah, there's pieces of team-based learning. I'm not a team-based learning fundamentalist. You know, there are some folks who will say like you have to do the whole enchilada, all four pieces exactly this way, or you're doing it wrong. Um, and I think when you put all four pieces together, it works super duper well. I also know that every teacher's got to make something their own. And if like some piece of it you don't want to play with at this point in time, or you don't see them like connecting the way that you want to in your teaching style, great. We all bring our own strengths and weaknesses, and we should bring our individuality to the classroom because that's what makes us unique and makes it our students lucky to have us. So was there anything about TBL that you wanted me to kind of there's the origin story of TBL. Happy to
Usually, Michael,
chew.
I put a quarter in you, and 45 minutes later, I don't have to worry about anything because you used to say TBL was your drug of choice. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yep. Still
Um,
say that.
yeah, I can't get you to do illegal drugs, but you instead just are into
Mm-hmm.
TBL, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean
Mm-hmm.
that was quite a statement because you were really into that. You were really convinced by that, and I mean your dissertation was on TBL. We did a few studies on TBL. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us a little bit about your career after getting the PhD and how you've maintained an interest in TBL and being active in that.
Yeah. So um, I ran into this field called faculty development when I was finishing that master's degree, that 2 years master's in the early 90s, um, where it was basically a program to prepare uh, people to go on for faculty careers. And I found that having conversations around the table about teaching and learning in the college classroom was like it for me. That's what I wanted to do. Like, I don't just want to keep having these conversations for the rest of my life. So it was a master's program. Can't do a whole lot with a lot of university faculty with just a master's. I did wind up getting a position at the University of Oregon, supporting their graduate students, teaching and learning wise. Um, and there's a lot you can do with a master's, but when it comes to actually counseling faculty who have PhDs, they're a bit, choosy. Anyway, so I supported grad students at the University of Oregon and some faculty, and that's when Larry Michelson came in 1998, and I'm like my eyes were opened, and that's where that was my first hit of that drug. Um, and so I puttered along, doing faculty development, teaching people team-based learning and that kind of stuff to the best of my ability. And then I realized, I finally have to do this. If I'm going to be a faculty developer in higher ed, at the top level of my ability, I need to get a PhD. So, um, yeah, it's true. So, so that's when I went back to Texas, or that's when I went to Texas and met Dan. And there's a question, two questions there. I'll stop and I'll continue regaling you with my fascinating history. But first, let me see. Mary, what's your question?
I was just going to ask that in the paper, you all mentioned that student explanation sometimes is better. So how would you explain that when it comes to novice, expert, and the issues that an expert has wider range? And if the student comes in with prior knowledge that is with some depth, I can understand that. But if they don't, then how does that apply?
Sure, great question. And my answer to that is that sometimes the person who has just learned something can be the best teacher of it because they still remember the exact misperception that they had. They can say, oh yeah, you're thinking about it this way. I thought about it that way too. You can't think about it this way. You got to think about it this way. And so they can help like their fellow learner basically make that step forward in the zone of proximal development. Whereas you and I, faculty members, if we ever had that misconception, we had it a long time ago and might not even remember it anymore. And some things are just kind of obvious to us that 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 we've kind of lost the detail of those misconceptions over time. That's my answer to that question. And also, they're not always better. They're sometimes better.
Yet what happens with the entire group has the same misconceptions? And isn't it the job of the instructor to be aware of what a learner's going through? I mean, it's what we're supposed to do when we teach. We think about all of the issues that our students are going to encounter.
Mhm.
And so if everybody has a misconception, what happens then?
What if it's the blind leading the blind?
Yeah.
That is the role of immediate feedback, right? They make a decision, they make their decision public through simultaneous report, and then you have the delightful job as an instructor to tease out their thinking. And you don't have to go, you're right, you're wrong, let's move on. It can be, you said A, you said D, like, that's interesting, tell me about your thinking. And if, I don't care what the right answer is in this particular case, tell me about your thinking. And they'll start explaining their thinking. No, well, don't explain it to me, explain it to them. They said D, you said A, they said D, like, what's going on? And then you get the groups conversing with one another. And groups are smart, whole classes are really smart. A lot of times they'll find their way in their own language, referring to the TV shows they watch that we don't, all of that stuff in a kind of a self-organizing way. I don't disagree that our role as a teacher is to know our students as best as we can, to create as personalized, I guess, a learning experience as we're able to each learner's abilities, backgrounds, capabilities. And that's why I am a big fan of Team BL in big, large classes where that's pretty much off the table for a lot in a lot of ways anyway. So TBL can give in large classes students that feeling of having a group of people who knows them and needs them and will miss them when they're gone and can help explain things to them.
Thank you. That was great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Rebecca?
Yes. So I was wondering, I mean, it sounds great and Dr. Robinson's used it and I love it. Will it work or what have the results been for high school, middle school, elementary school? At what age is too young and what kind of platform? Because one of the things that our school we're struggling with is to find the right platform for digital with student teamwork. And so just could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with it outside of higher ed. I do know it's had a lot of adoption in middle school. Uh, our colleague, our colleague Sharon Vaughn at UT Austin has done a lot of research. Her lab has done a lot of research on it in middle schools. There's a lot of adoption of it in middle school math classes, I happen to know. I don't know earlier than that. It's a really interesting question because so much of what I consider makes it so kind of juicy and sparkly is the social dance that we do in terms of bringing the right answer, not trying to get it wrong for the team, wanting to be a part of this thing. And we experience that differently as we grow through stages of our lives. And so I'm not the right person to ask, or I'm not an expert person to ask when it comes to kind of stuff out of higher ed. I do know there's a pretty good amount of it in middle school, or of writing about it in middle school, I should say. In terms of platforms and online, that's kind of the rub. Because as soon as you move online, especially now with AI, um, the cheating ability is just there. Like sure, if they're remote, I should say, on not just online, but like online and kind of remote from one another, can have another computer open, can have somebody else in the room, that kind of thing. And we don't like to assume that of our students, but the the learning doesn't happen as well if we don't struggle together, and being co-present makes that true intellectual struggle
So
a
with the
reality.
middle school studies you're aware of, did they just use a paper platform?
I think so. I don't know. It's been a while, to be
Okay.
fair.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I will say Into Dashboard is a really darn good platform if you're familiar with it at all. It's the one that was created by folks who were in the TBL Collaborative. So faculty kind of like put it together and then started a business. They're the ones who now sell the scratch off cards. So Into Dashboard, it's kind of a stupid name, honestly, but that's the name of the company. Yeah, let's see. It's impossible to predict all misconceptions and mistakes for sure, for sure. Yeah. Great. These are great questions. If you have others, please, let's do it that way. I will say, having finished my PhD, we continue our story. We rejoin our hero back at UT Austin, having run into this fellow, Dan Robinson, who was willing to give TBL a try. And we had some interesting, there were some things that I experienced at UT Austin that, you could only experience at UT Austin. For example, the wildly demotivating effect of like a nationally famous football player being one of the students in the class and not giving a damn. That I feel like that disengagement radiated off of him out to the people around him. Wouldn't get that in a lot of other schools. But we did learn a lot. I did an article there where I was really actually this is kind of a cool thing. I tape recorded. It was digital, so it was excitingly high tech at the time. But I used digital recorders to record the conversations of two groups in each of two classes that Dan was teaching. And then what I did is I transcribed. This is before, our automatic transcription. So I literally was sitting there as a grad student listening and typing, transcribed their conversations of these groups through the readiness assurance process and their application activities. And then I compared how their conversations went to how they did on the tests and stuff like that. And I was super lucky because I got one group that got better at working together over time, and one group that got worse at working together over time. And how I measured working together, like how good they are at working over time, it's rough, but it's arguably close. But basically, looking at the difference between the highest scoring individual in that team and then how the team wound up doing overall. So if there's 20 points on the quiz, highest scoring individual gets 15. That means there's 5 points left for the team to like outperform the highest performing individual. And so you just see like, did that amount claimed by the team above the highest performing individual get bigger or smaller? And in one team, and a lot of teams, they go up. In the one team I got, it went down, which is like, wow, that's fascinating. How did you pull that off? And so I looked at their behavioral, their conversation behavior, and I saw two patterns that were pretty clear. And they were using the scratch off cards. Have you showed them the scratch off cards, Dan? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think those are in a museum someplace.
Oh no! Oh no, Dan! Oh no! So, oh gosh, I can do some show and tell
Hey,
here.
Michael, what wasn't it? What wasn't the person who created those named Epstein? I think it was.
God.
It was the guy who had the scan the little scratch offs. It was like
disappointing.
the company was Epstein, so that's
Yeah,
probably
it
why
was.
they went under.
Thanks, Dan. Can always count on Dan for like the almost inappropriate comment. So basically, what these let me see. These are like a combination between a Scantron form and a lotto ticket, because there's a star underneath the right answer here. It's like A, B, C, D, and then the numbers down the side. And basically what you do, you don't necessarily have to give the whole, this is 50 items. We would like cut these into 10 or whatever for a quiz. And the students, they turn in their individual they take the individual test, turn them in, then they gather around and they have the questions, and they're multiple choice, and they come to some consensus on what they think the team answers, and you scratch it off just like a lotto card. See if I can do this with a pen. I don't have a quarter handy. I don't think you're going to be able to see this. The stars aren't super dark. But anyway, point being, like there you can see I've scratched some of it off. Ooh, can you? Yeah. So this is a number of attempts, like Dan has, get it right on the first try kind of thing. So all of that to say, like these were a revolution, because team-based learning existed before these things did. And the way that it worked in the original class, Larry Michelson, the guy who invented team-based learning, I don't know if some of you maybe aren't old enough to remember to know what the Scantron form is. It's basically a bubble sheet, and Scantron was the name of the corporation. And they had these big machines that looked like a big printer, basically, and you'd feed these bubble sheets through, and it would spit out a report. And it would like tick on the little sheet, the answer sheet, the bubble sheet, where the right answers were. Okay, Larry Michelson would wheel one of these Scantron machines into the lecture hall. And he would have his students fill out their individual tests, turn them in, then take another Scantron, team Scantron, fill it out, walk up to the Scantron machine, zip, run it through, and then they got their immediate feedback. Now, that's good, but it only gives you one round of team performance feedback for the entire test. Okay, things like this and your attempt things that Dan uses, this gives you a round of team feedback every single attempt. So if you and I are on a team and I think the answer is A and you think the answer is B, and I'm kind of socially dominant and you're kind of quiet, on the first test, on the first question, I'll probably kind of charm or bully my answer onto the team test. And so immediate feedback, scratch, 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 or in your case, click. Oh, it wasn't A, B. Or it wasn't A. Well, we don't know what it is. You said it was B, so let's try B. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It's B. So in that moment, we learned that the team had the right answer. The right answer did reside within the team, and it's just how we communicated that cost us points. So next time around, I'm going to be more interested in pursuing your opinion. You're going to be more interested in asserting it, and our teammates are going to be more interested in wanting the best thinking to get talked about before we all decide. So these things were fabulous. I still haven't told you what made the team that got worse do so. So I'm coming back to my story for the punchline on that. Basically, the two things that the differences in their behavior. First was they'd take the individual test, and the team that got worse over time, when they were saying, what'd you put on question 1, for example, they'd just say A, C, I put B, I put D. The team that got better at working together over time had like 3 or 4 times more frequently than the other team, they would use some form of hedging language. Like, I put B, but I could see D. Or I was torn between A and C. Or I had A, but I changed my answer to B. So that kind of like, I'm open to discussion here. Signaling occurred 3 to 4 times more often, which is just really, really interesting. And I've even kind of like stolen that insight into how I sometimes talk in my office. I'll tell you what that looks like in a second. Well, before I move on, I'll tell you, I have found a really cool trick when discussing ideas with people is when you float an idea, say, okay, I have an idea, but I don't know if it's a good one. Like, okay, I have an idea, but I'm not sure this is even really a good idea, but it's good in my head and I want to say it. That tells everybody, like, I'm not ego attached. Like, let's actually talk about the ideas. So it's neat. It's a neat little insight and tool. The second thing that the teams that got better at working together over time did, like 3 or 4 times more frequently, is if they couldn't come to consensus on a question, they'd table it, go down, do the rest of the questions, and then come back. Because if you and I can't decide on question 2, well, over questions 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we're gathering more data about who knows what they're talking about on this content. And so that when we come back to question 2, like, yeah, you've been right the last 4 times, let's go with your answer. So those are 2 things that I learned in Dan Robinson's class by recording and transcribing his students. Boy, I really wish I'd had AI transcription back then. That would have been a whole lot easier.
The good old days when we had hungry grad students who were willing to do anything to graduate, right? Yeah, I was gonna counter your story about